The choir loft. Yeah. Okay, here we go, and welcome back. Here you've got your stuff, and we're going to work with it. So if any of you don't have it and you left it home or whatever, try to lean over with somebody or somebody that's in a row or next to you that can share it. And if you would share your stuff with other people who may not have it. Last week, we're also, in the same time we're looking at that stuff, and I'll refer to it as stuff because, you know, otherwise, I mean, we were looking at page 981 in the Bible in Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 9. And in Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 9, there was a statement made by Paul, who is actually Apollonius or whoever wrote this stuff. And he was talking about, you know, the Old Testament stuff that we read about, the religion. Remember, this is the same guy who said, get away from the Christ, what's the actual words? Doctrine, leaving the principles of the doctrines of Christ. And then he's telling us here that these other things were just symbols. He says in Hebrews 9, in verse 9, which were a figure for the time then present. In other words, a tabernacle and a temple were the figure of those, but there was religious things, gifts and sacrifices. But then he says that could not make him that did the service perfect as pertaining to conscience. And I think Gloria showed us this word too, which became very interesting when you break this down. And what we're doing now, we're walking hand in hand. The word con means with, and we're walking hand in hand with science, conscience, with science, because basically that's what we're determining. That's what we're beginning to understand. And that other word that's very important there that is used in Hebrews 9 is perfect. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, there's no way that I can be perfect. Well, there is, because when the thoughts of the mind cease and there is nothing but this white void of nothingness, there is perfection there. So, anyhow, we then realize that it takes something else other than churches and religions and books and so forth and so on to get us to this point of perfection where there's a reason then for us to be able to become part of the plan. And part of the plan is for each one of us to learn how to use the computer that has been placed on top of your shoulders. If you reach up, and, you know, it's probably there. You'll find midway between your shoulders a round object, okay? This round object is placed strategically there with all kinds of stuff in it. But one of the main parts of it is a computer. And it is a magnificent computer that is able to do things that there's no computer on the face of the earth at this point is yet able to do. The problem with this is, I know I've got a computer at home. How many of you have a computer at home? All right, that's a lot of people in a small room have a computer. What's the chances of you getting wonderful information out of that computer if you don't touch it? You just go into the room and sit there and hope. Or pray, or claim. And I'm claiming the internet. I'm claiming the World Wide Web. And the screen stays blank. Nothing comes on. Absolutely. But this is exactly what you're told to do by the people who taught you in religion with your computer that God placed here right between your shoulders on the top. He said, and you're told by religious people, don't touch it. Now, how are you going to understand what God expected of you and what God has for you if you don't turn it on? You can't. So you've got to understand that. See? Or look at Hebrews 9:10, which he talks then about these rules, which stood only in meats and drinks and washings and ordinances imposed on them until the time of Reformation. In other words, all of the religious rules and regulations and traditions, which when taken literally mean absolutely nothing. And they're all a waste of time. What have they ever done for anyone? What has anybody ever accomplished? What has happened for the common good? But we've seen the deterioration of the earth and the cultures of the earth, in spite of the fact that every culture of the earth has this great religion, which is absolutely worthless. Then we get to this point here. in verse 11, but Christ, being come on high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands. Now, see, now you've got a tabernacle that's not made with hands. You have a temple that's not made with hands. And the only temple that you know of that's not made with hands, you can point to. If you take your finger and you point right there to the side of your head, that's a temple, and it's not made with hands. And that's where all of this is taking place. And that's what's talked about here. Not made with hands. But look what it says. But neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered into once the holy place, having obtained for us eternal redemption. Now the point is, we got this word blood again. And we have to say, well, is this the kind of blood he's talking about, that when you stick yourself and it drips out, or you cut yourself, or when you slice your finger on a piece of paper, or all these things? Is this the kind of blood we're talking about? Because if it is, then we have this monstrous type of power roaming through the stars that has this mania for watching blood drip out of people. I mean, this is tough stuff. What chance do you have? You live in Fork and River, and you got this thing roaming around wanting to see blood flowing and so forth and so on. And so then you'd say, well, gee, I don't have, I can't deal with this type of power. This is violent. But go to page 942, and let's try to put that aside, because it says in page 942 in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 50. Now I say this, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. So we're not talking about that kind of blood. We're talking about the Christ inner life force that is sacrificed, okay? So we've been all through this. We've talked about this. I've given you documentation of this. You've got all of this kind of stuff. You've got the word blood here in the thing, and it describes what it is. It's the sacrifice of the inner life force. But now let's get to the point. Then the point is, how is this Christ inner life force sacrificed? How? How does this happen? You see, the point is, you can go and you can read Buddhist books, you can read Hindu books, you can read religious books, you can read Islamic studies,